Welcome to Inventures, the podcast where we invite creative minds to invent the ultimate immersive adventure. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're stepping into the Inventures workshop with the incredible creative, Owen Kingston. Owen is the artistic director of Parabolic Theatre, a prominent UK-based immersive and interactive theatre company that pushes the boundaries of interactive experiences. From protecting an alternative Britain from a Nazi invasion to nudging 1970s Labour back from the brink of defeat, his work places audiences in high-stakes situations where their actions have genuine impact. Now with Bridge Command, Owen and his team offer London audiences the chance to experience flying their own spaceship, combining cutting-edge technology with storytelling to create a uniquely personal experience. Thank you for joining us, Owen.
Pleasure.
We worked on Bridge Command with you guys, and it was a great experience because we'd never done a LARPing experience before. Mm-hmm. But for those who are not familiar with your work, what was like the favourite thing you've ever worked on? And you can say Bridge Command if you want.
No, For King and Country is my favourite show that we've made.
Yeah.
Which was set in an alternate history, 1940s London. And it was, for those who know the history, it was a sort of the alternate history aspect of it was what if Germany managed to invade the UK. And so for that show, the audience were backbench MPs, unimportant people who were designated survivors in a sort of backup cabinet war rooms facility. And very quickly at the start of the show, they are thrust into the limelight. They have to take control and lead the country. And over the course of a couple of hours, they have to try and halt this Nazi invasion. It's terrific fun. It was sort of part war game, part role-playing exercise, part theatrical show. And like a lot of Parabolic's work, it was sort of at the intersection of a game and a theatre experience and a role-playing exercise. So, a lot of fun. But that was actually the first show that we made in that style, and it's still my favourite. I think it.
How many people did that at any one point?
Between 30 and 40. So most of the shows I made are for quite small audiences. Is what fascinates me about this sort of work is the intimacy of it and being able to give people meaningful decisions and choices that then have an impact on the course of the events of the rest of the show. And so smaller numbers let you do that. So it's about 30 and 40 people. It had, I think, 7 or 8 actors at its height. So the audience to actor ratio is sweet.
So agency is quite an important part for you of the immersive kind of project.
Yeah. I think it's a huge part of the point of doing it. It's the one thing that a live experience can deliver on better than a recorded media experience. So, if you've got a computer game, for example, having a live actor present who can meaningfully react to things that the audience suggest and incorporate those into the show, that's something you can't do in a computer game in the same way. It breaks out of the straitjacket of the decision tree model of writing this stuff, and it's unique to the live experience. It is, I think, the USP of a live immersive interactive experience. So that's the thing that I always try and focus on when we're making these things, because you can't get that anywhere else.
Right, and that's why you're called Parabolic Theatre,
yeah.
Right? Because the theatre element is the live element. It's the feeling of being in the room with real people.
Yeah.
But then also you have to have characters that can play off real people and
absolutely.
Think quickly enough to be able to sort of get you through it and yet stay within the rules of the game.
Yeah.
And so what kind of drew you to doing this format?
Sort of fell into it by accident almost, really, honestly. I got blown away in 2014, I think it was, by Punchdrunk's show The Drowned Man, which is, it was a very large scale, I think it's the largest show they've ever done, a very large scale immersive show, which is largely, it was on rails for a start. You can't really have any meaningful input into how it works, and it's largely silent because, like most of Punchdrunk's work, it was dance-driven. Honestly, that was life-changing for me. Seeing that work on that scale with that level of intimacy, I thought was incredible. So I thought, well, if I am going to make work like that, I have to I have to come up with something myself, and I don't want to just copy what they're doing. There's no point in doing that. So I started thinking, well, what are they not doing? What could you do in this zone of immersive, interactive, intimate work that is not already being done? And what kind of started to settle on was this idea of things where words were important. Punchdrunk is largely, not completely, but largely their work is silent. So could you make that sort of work but inject dialogue into it? And could you give the audience agency, more than just choosing what to watch? Could you allow them to affect the story? To what extent would that work? And so that set me off down a little rabbit hole of experiments, really, with some friends who were also working around this little theatre space in Croydon. And we took about 2 years, so from 2014 to 2016, it took about 2 years to experiment using that space, but also the area around. We did some outside work and all sorts of things, just to probe our own practice of how can we develop something that retains that level of intimacy, immersion, gives people real agency. Could we make work that does that? And that couple of years' experiments was a really exciting time. And there were 2 shows that came out of that we then, when we formed the company in 2016, we were like, we've got enough now. We reckon we can make something of this. We started Parabolic as a company and started looking for opportunities to make our first public shows that weren't just like tests, and so there were 2 shows that came out of those experiments from those 2 years. But For King and Country was the first show that was entirely new, which wasn't based on any of the experiments we'd done. And I think political theatre should be about addressing issues and getting people to think differently about them, about trying to change people's minds about things. But you don't do that by beating them over the head with your point of view.
Right.
You do that by presenting a scenario and then allowing them to engage with that scenario and see why people think differently to them. And I think immersive theatre has huge potential to do that really successfully, because one of the things that's great about immersive theatre is it encourages empathy in people. You literally walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. You're put in a position where not only do you get to see a story play out of people with different points of view to you, but you get to play a part in that story as well. That's the potential. So that's what we wanted to try and do with it, and I think we at least partially succeeded in achieving something that
change the minds,
challenges people, at least, makes them reconsider why they believe what they do.
The different people I have on this show is the different flavours, I think, of experiences that people are making. And I think, for me, I can see your version of immersive is very much like putting people in the driving seat of decision making, which I think is very interesting, because often with creative decisions, normal people don't make great creative decisions often. You need actors, you need some sort of storyline to help them along, but you're still interested in their decisions, right? So I'm guessing, like, how do you sort of balance that? Yeah.
I would actually say I'm more interested in their creativity than I am in their decisions. Because by saying you're interested in their decisions, that implies, again, it comes back to this idea of decision tree logic, which I think immersive theatre has wedded itself to rather foolishly. 99% of experiences you see made have got some kind of decision tree behind them if they require any sort of decision from the audience. Because that's how you write interactive fiction, right? That's how it's been done since forever. Choose your own adventure books are essentially a big decision tree. Computer role-playing games are essentially a massive decision tree. But those are recorded media. The reason you've got a decision tree is because the author is not going to come to your house and sit down next to you and, if he's given you option A and option B and option C and you choose, you're like, actually, none of those make sense to me, but I think we should do this instead. He's not going to be able to rewrite the book on the fly to be able to, or the computer game to be able to incorporate your creativity. That's impossible. That's why you've got defined choices and then you pick one. But in a live experience, suddenly that doesn't feel as satisfying anymore. If I'm given option A or option B or option C and none of those feel like they make good sense to me, And I think creatively, but what if we did option D instead? And then the actor who's standing in front of me, who knows option D is not a scripted possibility, has to turn to me and basically try and press their nose up to the fourth wall and say, "I'm sorry, but you cannot do that here." What we're doing is we're baking into our fun experiences the horrible negative customer service experience that you get when you ring up your bank and say, "I want to do this very reasonable thing," and they say, "Sorry, computer says no."
Right. But you have to spin that in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, and actually you never can. I've been to I go to a lot of immersive shows, and whenever I see tightly scripted immersive shows that are adhering to a decision tree model in that way, that inevitably comes up at some point. And there is no way to handle that well and leave people feeling so. It is always a disappointment. And I just didn't want to bake disappointment into my shows. I believe option D the one that the audience has come up with, should always be possible. The other big rule was we were never going to refuse a reasonable in-world suggestion or request from an audience member. So if they're like, if we say, well, sir, the Nazis are coming up the Nazis are driving all up the A2, and we need to stop them somehow. You can put your tank division to block the A2, or we can lay landmines down it. But and then they say, well, actually, can't we use our bombers and just bomb that section of it? So it's impassable. We hadn't pre-planned that. We hadn't pre-thought of that. But it's a reasonable in-world request. And the only real question we have to answer is, how does that impact the mechanics of the game? Which we're trying to hide from the audience anyway. So it isn't actually that hard to incorporate those things. When you come to Bridge Command, all we ever assume of you is that you are yourself in space in the 22nd century. We're not, you don't suddenly become Captain Alex, and you don't have to bring. Backstory.
It's not like D&D, basically.
No, it's not. You are just yourself in a different context. That's all we ever require. Some people do like to create character stuff, and that's fine, and it still works for that. But we never require you to, and we always expect you to behave in a reasonable and kind and polite manner to everybody else. There's none of this stuff that you sometimes get in LARPs, whereby you can be as rude as you like to people because you're playing a character. No. And the reason is, it just doesn't. LARP is a great hobby, but it's not really an industry, I don't think. And there are some people who are maybe trying to push in that direction, but the barrier to entry for LARP is just too high for the average person in the street who just wants to go out and have a fun evening out to really access it. Because if you've got to create a character or learn a whole bunch of stuff about a character that's been created for you, if you have to spend about the same amount of time as you would spend LARPing preparing to LARP, that's not a saleable thing for somebody who just wants a couple of hours fun times of an evening. I have sometimes described it to people as like LARP light, because there are a lot of things that are similar. And if somebody came along and they were a LARPer, they'd be forgiven for thinking, this is just a LARP, isn't it? But those differences are really important. And they do actually really profound. If you do approach it like it is a LARP and you make assumptions about it based on that, you're going to be disappointed. You're probably going to upset people, actually, or yourself. So it is a problem that we're always trying to navigate. Is how do we make a space that is welcome and accessible for the average cinema goer who's never done a LARP before in their life, probably never played a role-playing game before in their life, just likes the idea of flying a spaceship. How do we make a space that's accessible to them and also accessible to hardcore LARPers who go off to Empire and other massive blockbuster LARPs and spend thousands of pounds doing those things? Because we want them to be able to enjoy it as well. But everybody needs to understand this is its own thing. It is different to all of these other things around it. And whilst it has elements of all of these things in it, it is its own thing and it's got its own way of working.
Moving on from your work, do you remember the first sort of thing you experienced that was like, I definitely want to go into this kind of world?
I mean, that probably was the Drown Man.
It was Drown Man. So yeah.
But I also remember starting going to Secret Cinema around about that time. And actually, Secret Cinemas Brazil, which was in Croydon.
Right, yeah.
And a friend of mine got wind of because it was in Croydon, and then I went and sort of had a preview before it opened and around the set and stuff. Seeing them do that. Obviously, there's a different format to what Punchdrunk was doing, and it was talky, but it was kind of broken up into smaller little scenarios across a much bigger space. That I found that really fascinating. But I think sort of seeing smaller scale work as well for the first time, and thinking that because obviously all the parabolic stuff has been smaller scale like that. We've done one thing that was sort of for a couple hundred people, and it was a one-off rather than an ongoing show. So I think, seeing some of the smaller shows out there, that particularly in the wake of the Drowned Man, there was some very creative. It's like an explosion of creativity. That's what I really loved about Punchdrunk's impact on the industry, was that they inspired a lot of people, particularly with that show.
They did. I think it was an era of... So we started also in 2016 as a company, and Drowned Man came out around the same time, I think 2015. So I think there's probably there was a moment there, I think, in London in 2015, 2016, when just sort of...
There was a wave.
It was like everyone... Yeah, it was a wave. It was like escape rooms were becoming a thing. People would just sort of, I guess, realise that there could be something else. Yeah. And Punchdrunk were basically just out there on their own, more or less doing it. Yeah,
pretty much.
Secret Cinema were doing stuff, but it was like...
It had a different flavour.
Different flavour, came a bit later. Yeah. I'm going to bring us to the crux of the entire point of bringing you here, which is, if I was to remove budget, time, even physics, what attraction would you create? What would be your fantasy attraction that you would have always wanted to make but you've never been able to?
That's really interesting. If money were no object, I would love to have a large enough playground of a venue where you could create multiple different environments that you could send people off onto adventures in, that felt distinctly different, but that was all unified under one kind of narrative purpose. There's lots of ways of doing that. There's lots of different narrative purposes you could frame that around. One that I have talked to people about before is that idea of creating the ultimate sort of D&D style live role playing space, where you have, you had a fantasy setting, and you could build multiple different environments. You could have a castle, you could have dungeons, a swamp, a forest, and all under one roof somehow. Money is no object, right?
Yep.
Then you could have nearly limitless, D&D style fantasy party adventures going off into different spaces.
So essentially, you start from... As an audience member, you start from a neutral space.
Yeah, you stick them in a tavern because it's at the beginning.
Yeah. So and then it's like, and a wizard would be like, okay, where do you want to go?
Yeah,
I can open a portal to anywhere.
Yeah, and then off you go.
As long as it's, I suppose yes, we can make infinite amounts, but say in the real version of this, there's 100 spaces maybe, and it's just like, and that's the sort of thing is that you're just like, oh my god, I not only would you go to the first place and go, that's really cool. Yeah. Would you then go to the second and third and fourth and be like...
You could be there forever,
Yeah.
The science fiction equivalent of that would be to get the Stargate SG-1 license.
Right.
Right. And you start a Stargate command, and then somehow, with the magic of theatre, the Stargate opens and you go to one of any number of different... in the Stargate universe, every planet is just one terrain type, right? You've got the desert world and the jungle world and the Arctic world.
Probably budget reasons. Yeah, exactly.
And most of them are Canada, because that's where it was shot.
They had a budget, and they were in Canada, so they were like, as long as it's Canadian.
As long as there's big trees or snow, we can do it. If you had access to a bunch of different sets like that, and you could send people through the Stargate to different places.
And you said there'd be something tying it all together. So there'd be like, I guess you start in a tavern, but would there be like, essentially there's this storyline which is constantly going throughout wherever you are. I guess if it's like watching Star Trek or Stargate. This
is something that British One's done successfully that I don't think it's been done elsewhere, at least not in the immersive theatre sense. Which is that idea of an ongoing story for people. I mean, we've got people who have been back 50, 60, 70 times. We've got one guy who's got his 100th show coming up in a couple of weekends' time.
Wow.
So we have got, it's probably about, 12, 15% of our total people who've ever been to Bridge Command have fallen into that category of heavy repeat returners, people who have just bought into it and love it and have become characters in our universe, essentially, as themselves, but they have become an important part of the Bridge Command universe.
So really, I guess what we're dancing around here essentially is a kind of complete and utter immersion of yourself in a fantasy
a world that you can escape to, but that you can return to.
So I imagine that, a building with hundreds and hundreds of rooms, a huge place. But it would be a place that you would go about your daily life, and it'd be like you just go in there for, I'm going to go in there for a few hours, and you'd enter you'd always enter through the same way at the tavern, you see the same characters, and you'd be like, right, what's my next kind of chapter in the book, really?
Where am I going next? I've actually had a real dream about this. I had this fantastic dream that I didn't really want to wake up from, where there was a massive cavernous, like Millennium Dome-sized facility, which was just full of lots of sets like this, and you'd go in, you'd get into a costume, but for your whatever character you were, and then you'd be a wizard, you got your robes on or whatever, and then you step out into whichever environment your story is going to take you on today. That, I think, is talking about no budget. In theory, you could do that with VR.
Mm-hmm. In theory, yeah.
In theory. I just don't think VR, technology-wise, is there yet. I think headsets are too cumbersome, it's too unreliable, there's lots of problems with it, and it just doesn't... Actually, I've got a VR set, I've got two at home. I would love for it to work the way I want it to. It just isn't quite there.
Well, yeah, it's not what you've seen in TV shows. I mean, like, what's sort of ringing in my head is the Red Dwarf episode Better Than Life.
Yeah,
basically.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's many Red Dwarf episodes where they do kind of VR things, but essentially, like, for those who haven't seen it, Red Dwarf was a comedy TV show. Started in the 80s, science fiction. But basically, yes, the one episode, the crew of the ship discover this video game, and it's called Better Than Life, and essentially it allows them to basically be completely immersed in a life that's like the best life they could ever have. However,
they still managed to screw it up.
However, they managed to screw that up, because they screw everything up, and Rimmer ends up having the worst life ever, because he doesn't let himself have fun, basically. But that's what I'm thinking, is sort of like, does it sort of become this kind of essentially like a second life?
I think there is demand for that, and I think there's a lot of ethics around, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Probably not. But the world is getting more and more crowded. Overpopulation is the single biggest problem the world has. And at the moment we're living in a time where people can still go on holiday to different destinations, can still travel and that sort of thing, but it is taking its toll on the planet. Being able to, even if it's a fantasy creation, live a more satisfying life than maybe the 9-to-5 drudgery you found yourself stuck in, there is an appeal to that. And one of the things we've seen with Bridge Command is if you give people a fantastic narrative space that they can go and play in for a while, actually they form bonds with each other in doing so. There are a lot of people who come to Bridge Command regularly who met at Bridge Command. They didn't know each other before we existed, but they've got to know each other playing a random pickup show together, found that they were kindred spirits, had a drink in the bar afterwards, and have come back to play alongside each other. And not a lot of people have 14 mates that they can just call on to go as a big group. So by necessity, people have had to team up with other people to play Bridge Command in a cost-effective way. But that's produced this unlikely and wonderful byproduct of it becoming a hub for community. We've got a thriving Discord now. We've got around 1,000 people on it, and not all of those are super active, but there's a large active contingent of real passionate people, and they're our favourite people to run shows for, because they've really bought into the world. They really want what we're offering, and we can have a lot of fun with them. Going back to that thing about For King and Country, you can rely on the audience to want to have fun. We've got to know some of these people now. We know the sort of stuff they like and they don't. We can do great shows for them because we've got to know them for a bit. and they help build the product with us. We tap into their creativity, and that has resulted in things like campaigns and special events and things that we never imagined we would do when we were first designing the show, but they've organically come about. And I think it's really important to build strong bridges between the people making the show and the people consuming it, so that you're delivering what they want, and so that there is a kind of two-way traffic of communication there. That raises some challenges, because one of the issues we sometimes come up against is that people want more of our time than we're able to give. Because when you start to get to know the people who come to the show, to some extent you become friends with some of these people, to some extent. But it does have thousands of people come to it a month. And that's still too many people for me to reasonably talk to all of them about the show. Yeah. But because they can come to the show, and I'm performing it from time to time, and see me standing in front of them performing, it kind of gives the sense that...
Well, they shared something with you.
Yeah, I'm more available than Peter Jackson is. Therefore, they should be able to come and talk to me, right?
Right, but that's the thing. You have... Peter Jackson hasn't shared... He's shared the film with us, but he wasn't there.
He wasn't there
doing it with us, acting it with us. I think at that point... Once you've shared a moment with an actor, you've been in a thing where it's been life changing for you.
Yeah.
You want to turn to the person.
Yeah, you want to kind of talk to them, and that's not unreasonable.
Yeah,
but it is unreasonable to assume that everybody who comes to show should be able to do that.
Yeah,
because it's just too many people, and that's all we do.
Yeah,
I've got a lot of other things I've got to
do.
do.
In Fantasyland, you'd have endless robots that could just could just talk to people.
Yeah.
Because that's
Westlife, isn't it?
Westworld.
Westlife is very different.
Westlife would be an amazing immersive experience. It's just five guys, and they're all robots, and it goes wrong. It gows really wrong. But yeah, so Westworld. I was actually thinking about Westworld a little bit, because essentially, I mean, it's not in the realms of budget, but one day, possibly when robots become cheap enough, and sets become cheap enough, you could technically build entire theme park sized areas populated with characters that are machines, and literally create places where you could almost live out days and days, if not weeks, of your life in a completely different world. And that's kind of what we have a taste of now with theme parks. But essentially, it feel like that's sort of the end game for this sort of thing?
Well, there's an ethical question there.
Yeah.
Like how good is that actually for people?
For people, right? Yeah. Is it? Yeah.
Because actually, I think we have seen people get huge positive benefit out of Bridge Command, because it's a sort of living, breathing world that you can visit regularly and kind of lose yourself in for a bit. That is valuable. And I would say that's probably better than sitting on your own in your bedroom, losing yourself in a computer game in the same way, because you are at least interacting with real people, and that's good. But there's a lot of because we're only at the beginning of this journey. I don't know anybody else that's running something that you can return to in that way, where the world continues, where you become a part of it. And so we're discovering a lot of these ethical things as we go along.
When we sort of discovered immersive could be a thing, I suppose, that we could immerse people into stories. It's like, how far does one go with that, like in terms of time? Yeah. Because essentially, some people gone. I remember you said you might do overnights at some point at Bridge Command, and I've heard about obviously LARPing experiences that do entire weeks where you're in castles and things like that. But obviously, there's always a time when it ends, right? And you go back to your life.
Yes.
And you get to how much is too much, I guess.
You can't go and live in 2181.
Right.
As much as some people would like to, perhaps. I sometimes say to friends who I haven't seen for a couple of years, well, I live in space now, that's why.
Right. I mean, well, I guess you do.
Which is a good way of describing how all-consuming working on Bridge Command can be.
Well, indeed. I mean, yes, you basically do live there, I guess. That's sort of what I've heard. But essentially, I guess, as from a creative standpoint, if you were to create your fantasy project, which is essentially like maybe the going to many, many places, you could be there for a long time. As a creator, would you be like, okay, have I created something that's actually damaging?
Yeah, I think there's a risk, actually, and that's why, I mean, ultimately you probably can't make something like that outside of a digital environment because of budget constraints. But it comes back to that political theatre idea we talked about earlier. What is the purpose of this stuff, actually? What is does it have a purpose? Because I think it's perfectly valid for the purpose to just be, this is entertaining and fun. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right. I think that's why, that's the core of all of it, really.
Absolutely, right? Yeah. And if it isn't entertaining and fun, why are we doing it? But I think there is a purpose about it's art. Art reflects life. And it's a playground where you can explore new ideas, new thoughts, new theories, new concepts outside of your real life. But if you learn something valuable there, you can carry it back to your real life, and it can enhance your real life. It can change positively how you are. You can see that, I think, sometimes in Bridge Command. Bridge Command attracts a lot of people who are neurodivergent, and I am myself. In fact, most of our cast are, in different ways. We also get a lot of trans people come to our show as well, which is something that I'm really proud. I think we've made a really safe space for trans people. It helps that some of our cast are trans and non-binary, but the Bridge Command is like a kind of safe playground where you can try being a different version of yourself. And although we never expect you to be anything other than you, you can be a version of yourself that's a bit different, and it's a safe space to try that. And you can see whether something works, and you can take it back to the real world with you.
And that's the key, the taking back.
Yeah.
Because in the world where you lived in Westworld, you would never take
You'd
never go back, and you would become your character.
Yeah.
And if anyone's ever seen Westworld, it doesn't go very well.
No, it
basically
ends very badly
for anybody involved. But essentially, I think that's the point, right? Is that like art is transient. You take it back to your life, you improve on your life. It makes you think about your life differently, and it enriches your life.
Yeah.
But you go back to your life. Your life is the core element.
Yeah.
This is just a bit of fun.
Yeah.
Really.
And and I think that's where the ethics question is. And I think there is a duty of care on us as creatives and performers to sort of curate the experience we're giving the audience in such a way that they are then able to transition that back to their real life, and that they get something valuable from us without becoming stuck with us.
Right.
And we have a weekly staff meeting on a Wednesday afternoon. We all get together, all of our full-time staff anyway. It's impossible to get everybody together. It's just too big a team. And sometimes we talk about this stuff, and we talk about particular audience members that we're very fond of the people who come to British Command. There's nothing more, there's no greater compliment that someone can give you than to give you their time and their money, to spend their time with you, to spend their money on you, to come and hang out with you.
And come back.
Yeah.
That's the other thing,
And we want, for people who come back regularly, we put in a lot of effort to make sure they're getting what they want from us and getting what they need from us, but also to make sure that is a positive thing.
Right.
And we have occasionally had discussions of individual people. Do we need to be? I remember back in pre-pandemic, so before Bridge Command, we had this sometimes with people who would come very regularly to our shows. And I remember a particular young lady who spent a lot of money coming to one of our shows, and we were concerned she actually didn't have the money. She was kind of almost become addicted.
Right.
To what
is
we
it
were
like a
doing.
drug which had taken over?
Yeah. And so what we did in the end was we said to her, look, and we did it very quietly because we didn't want this to become a thing, but we said, look, just come back whenever you want. You don't have to pay. And because we just felt really bad. We felt like this is money she's putting towards something that she shouldn't really be spending. And actually that shifted something for her. I think it made her realise, oh no, I am spending probably too much money doing this.
It's hard to essentially creating an addictive substance.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of this now, which I think people don't really understand that they are creating addictive substances, especially around sometimes in forms of content. People don't really understand that that is, you see people on the train, they're all on their phone looking at whatever, but the drug it's not a substance, it's entertainment. And it's and it's an endless stream of entertainment. In a way, the portal world that you describe already exists, just through the phone.
Yeah.
And then just and I guess that in that the world of endless holes that you can go down.
Well, you have to start questioning, what is it that really makes you happy in life? And a lot of us spend most of our time pursuing things that don't actually result in genuine happiness. There's a lot of technical language that I don't have, but I was reading some stuff on this relatively recently. There's a name for it, and I don't remember what it is, but the effect where you buy something new because you think that's going to make you happy, and it does for a short period, but it wears off super fast, and so the acquisition of new stuff is not really, But there are a handful of things that provably, and I think it was Yale University published a bunch of experiments on this, things that provably do increase overall happiness, and one of them is gratitude. Being grateful for the things you have, actively grateful, is a remarkably powerful thing. Another is genuine connection with other people. And that's something where I think immersive theatre really does have an impact. It does allow you to make genuine connections with people. And, when people come to our shows, when they interact with a character being played by one of the actors, they are interacting with a character. But when they are interacting with other audience members, they are interacting with real other people. And actually sitting down and having a meaningful conversation with somebody else, whether it's somebody you know well or a stranger, provably increases your levels of happiness. Mm-hmm. Doing it on a regular is really important for,
I agree.
a happy life.
I mean, I most of my job is meeting people I don't know.
Yeah.
And like it's true, and there are proven. They call it like social prescriptions, essentially, where like especially older people who don't see very many people, they say you should go to a book club, or you should start a class, that
connects you meaningfully to other people. And actually, for our actors as well, I think they do, even though they're playing a character, they do make genuine connections with audience members. I've done that myself. And you start to get to know the people, and you slip out of character a little bit when you're sitting in the bar chatting, because you just, you do just start to
start making a connection with someone, and it feels wrong to be a character.
Absolutely.
Like weirdly, I used to, when I was much younger, I used to go clubbing. I used to practice my Scotch accent because I used to do acting, and it would go too well to the point where like people would just be convinced I'm Scottish, and then I'd be like, I actually quite like this person, and I've had quite a long conversation with them, and I have to now drop this because. And then I remember one occasion when I was like, I'm actually not Scottish. I just started doing it earlier this evening, and sorry. And they were horrified. They were just like, "Who is this person?" And I think that's like, I never did it again after that. It's that thing where once you make a connection to someone, you want to be honest.
Yeah. One of the unexpected things we found about the show actually is what we started calling the soap opera in space. Because we're playing these characters, these particular Warspite crew characters all the time. And we like having fun with that. We like kind of developing interpersonal drama. One of the things that people reattend the show for is to follow those favourite characters and what's happened to them. And so when you find you make a bit of a bond with particular audience groups, they want to know the details of the life of this character, and actually we've sort of created this extended soap opera like drama that takes place mostly in the bar, where all of this stuff is. But
then that's Star Trek's the same.
Yeah,
I mean, at the end of the day, why we tune in every week is you want to see what's happening. Like a lot of stuff happens in the bar.
That's it. You invite those characters into your living room every week because you've got to know them, become like friends.
Yeah, and that's the joy of a recurring series or recurring thing. Is you don't need to build like a film. You have to build a character every time, and you go through a whole thing, and it ends. Whereas with a TV show, it's like after the 2 or 3 episodes, it's like I'm up to speed now. Yeah. By a couple of series in, you're just like, look, I just want to see these characters play out against each other in some way. Yeah. And it's like slipping on an old pair of jeans. It's just like I'm comfortable here, but I can still do new things with these characters. But it's kind of amazing that you've managed to create something like that. Again, it's very unique.
That bit of it was inadvertent. We didn't think that would happen. But now that it has happened, going back to your ideal show, I would want to make something that allows for that again, because that's been one of the most rewarding and enjoyable parts of this process, is creating that world, bringing that world to life, and it not just sort of endlessly repeating the same day of that world. Like you go to a Punchdrunk show, and you are kind of like I think of it as being a ghost inside somebody else's dream. That's what it feels like.
And it's very mechanical in that
Yep.
it's always
it's
playing
always in a loop.
In a loop,
and you're essentially repeating the worst day of someone's life over and over and over again. Getting to actually play out months of somebody's life over time, durationally, and allowing the audience to play a role in that and come and go from that. That's been hugely fun. That's bringing a living, breathing world to life that you can go and be a part of every day. That's been probably one of the most rewarding parts of Bridge Command as a project.
I love that. Like, I think I've seen people try to attempt this as an idea, like in terms of like a thing that you can keep going back to, basically over and over again, like a permanent installation which kind of changes over time, but you can keep revisiting it, as a sort of actual physical thing. I think we're on the cusp of this now, in terms of like, I mean, you are doing it, but essentially like I think we're on the cusp of seeing more of these things work as people are used to TV series, video games, like perhaps, you know, in generations' time, like these things will be a normal kind of thing. Like,
well, I think the key to it is the characters, and the characters feeling believable and feeling real enough. That's what people want, and you see that in TV series. That's what people keep watching a TV series because they've invested in the characters more often than not. And you know, the characters therefore have to move beyond archetypes. They can't be caricatures. There has to be depth to them. They have to be relatable. They have to be people you can identify with. And that's what's been really magical. And you see different audience members gravitating towards different people, and kind of, you know, befriending the character in character. That's been fascinating. I don't know anywhere else that's doing that outside of LARP. LARP does do that to some extent. That is LARPing. You know, that's where we start getting into that territory quite effectively. So it's
but I think
space.
I love it. I just think it's like you've kind of hit on a chord of like how humanity works. I think you just sort of what people like, as you said, are connecting with the character in character. I'm going to leave it at that. I think that's a great thing. If you were to give a piece of advice to anyone wanting to create an immersive world, what would you say?
If you can do anything else, do that instead.
As in, do any other job.
Any other job. If you can, if you've got any other skills at all, go and do that instead. You will have a quieter, calmer, more peaceful, more satisfying, less frustrating, less anger-inducing life.
Yeah,
for sure.
This is what writers say. They're always just like, just don't, please don't.
Anything else,
here lie monsters, you'll go crazy.
Yeah.
But then they'll also say, like, but if you really want it.
Yeah, and that's the second part of it. It's like, but I would go further and say, if you really can't imagine a life doing anything else at all, and you've got to do this, then fine. Throw yourself into it 150%. There's we nearly didn't do Bridge Command. We nearly didn't even start.
As in with the prototype, even, yeah.
We nearly didn't do it. Bertie Watkins from Colour Factory, you know, there was a show that had been in the basement that had closed early because it hadn't gone very well. And he said, look, the basement's empty over the summer, and I haven't got anything to put in it. Do you just want to use the basement, just make something, just experiment? And if it's good, run it in the autumn, because I haven't got anything lined up for the autumn either. And if it isn't good, don't worry about it. You'd have to pay me anything. I was like, free space. When do you ever get free space? I can't turn that down. And then somebody offered me, I think it was 6 or 7 different old office computers and a massive screen TV for free. And I was like, that's a Starship Bridge. Yeah. The universe is telling me to make this thing.
Yeah.
And so we kind of almost reluctantly, I was like, okay, I've got the free space, I've got free gear, and I've got time, and I can't really afford to go on holiday. Let's just give this a go. And so we made initially we just set up the computers to test the Bridge Simulator. That's all we were going to do. Maybe we'll get some audience to come in and test the Bridge Simulator and see if it's any fun. And they were like, oh, we could make a bit of a set. We've got some old flats here. The company that had moved out had left a bunch of stuff in the basement. We could kind of make a rough start. We just make a rough series of rooms just to test it. And then we made the rooms and we should really paint this. And they were like, oh, but we could theme this a bit better. And before you knew it, we'd built a spaceship. It was very shoddy, and it was, some of it was literally made of cardboard. But and it was, we didn't spend any money on it. It was all done by us. I'm not sure it was safe either, actually, thinking back on it. But we made this thing, and it was just fun. And so we were like, right, let's run it till October. We'll put tickets on sale, and we'll run it for a couple of months and see what happens. And then the demand was sufficiently good on very little advertising that we were able to keep it running and keep it running and keep it running. And we only closed down that prototype the weekend that Boris Johnson announced everything had to close for the lockdown. So it was March, whatever it was.
23rd. I remember because it's my birthday.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, what present, eh?
Yeah.
So, and in that time, the guys who later came along and partnered with us to fund Bridge Command came along just as random people. We didn't know who they were. We didn't invite them. We'd never heard of them before. They just came for a normal Bridge. They didn't even have that great a show, actually, because we had some new staff who were trying out that night. But I got a long email from Sonny, who's the leader of that company, the next day saying there's something here that's incredible, and there's a lot of stuff you got to fix, and you need a proper set and all sorts of things. But there's a German idea that's incredible. We want to stump up the money to make this happen, and we can fund this. And in the end, they went into a tune of it was $3.5 million it cost to build the set. And so sometimes you just have to, there was nothing to compare Bridge Command to really. There was no. A lot of times if you're actively trying to raise money, you need something that you can point at and say it's going to work just like this in order to raise the money. It's very difficult to raise it otherwise. But we had it handed to us on a plate. It was. Sometimes you just hit that stride and you have to run with it.
Yeah, because it was cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved Social Network's probably my favourite films, and there's just a bit where they kind of have created Facebook, but they don't really know obviously how it's going to go. Yeah. And Mark Zuckerberg, Jesse Eisenberg is like, we don't even know what it is. All we know is that it's cool. and they're just like, and so they're just like, why not just keep doing cool stuff?
And I think the key thing, like going back to what we were talking about at the beginning about how you structure, the mindset you have going into it, the one thing that we were determined to do was to build something that was going to be flexible. Most immersive shows are built to tell a specific narrative that is on rails, or if it has got decision points in it, they are decision points in a narrative decision tree structure. So everything about it can be nailed down in advance, and it's never going to change. It's going to be that. That's what you've made. One of the challenges we had when we were actually building Bridge Command, we got to the point of we were planning it and building it, was getting the tech teams and the other sort of construction teams to understand that there wasn't going to be a lighting Q state 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a linear fashion, because every mission was going to be completely different. And at the whim of the audience. So everything had to be built flexibly to respond dynamically. And that really was a struggle to get tech teams to buy into that. Clockwork Dog were brilliant. Clockwork Dog got it straight away. They're like, yep, no, we're with it. It was everybody else. Just kind of like, it was a bit of a...
We're gamers.
Yeah,
and we made a lot of games.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
We were used to thinking that way.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Theatre people are not. Everything's the same every night, and it's
that's right.
linear.
Yeah. And if something unexpected happens, it's a problem to be solved.
Well, yeah, exactly. In our way, it's like, no, we want things to happen in different orders, and that's like, and you just have to think that way.
Yeah.
It's just more work.
Yeah. Yes.
Basically.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. But
worth doing.
Work worth doing. Of course. I said all we know that it is cool. That's why we even continued. Finally, if you could leave listeners and watchers with one sort of last spark of inspiration, what would that be?
We have not even scratched the surface yet, I think, of what is potentially possible with this form of storytelling. If you were to compare it to Hollywood as an industry, we've only just made it out of the silent movie stage. Punchdrunk was our silent movie stage. We've only just sort of started making talkies. And there are a lot of people in the sort of immersive sector who will grandstand with a lot of great advice and best practice. We're not an industry that's been alive long enough to have best practice. What a joke. There's no best practice out there. There's just, we did this once and it worked, so we're going to do it like this again. So my inspirational thought is think outside the box. There is so much more to be discovered and invented. Don't just do what somebody else did because it worked once, because the best result you're going to get is that it doesn't work quite as well. You're probably not going to improve on it because you didn't invent it. So you're going to do a bad replica, and you might not make as much money as them. And if they only barely made enough money as it is, that's a terrible business model. There needs to be new structures for making this kind of work cropping up every week if we're going to really explode and do everything that
if we want to become the film industry, basically, we've got a long way to go.
We've got a long way to go, and we've got a lot of new stuff to invent. So,
sound.
So pioneer. Yeah. Be a pioneer. Don't just... There are a lot of... and I hope they all die and fuck off, honestly. The people who... the suits who just want something they can make money out of are going to cripple this industry. By taking something that somebody else has done, replicating it badly, and then maximising how much cash they can get out of it. There are already people trying to do that. And I hope they realise quickly that this is not an industry that's going to work with. So do it somewhere else where it's going to work better. If you want to be a millionaire, go and start a coffee shop. Go and become a McDonald's manager. That's the quickest route you're going to get to be a millionaire. It's not going to be doing this stuff. Do it if you love what we were talking about earlier, creating that those communities, creating something that is going to have a social and political impact that's going to positively impact people's lives. There's a wonderful tool here to be explored and developed, and that's the good reason for making this.
Yeah, and we're at the, as you say, we're so early, we're so nascent. There's that's why I started doing escape rooms. I played an escape room in 2015, and was like, nobody knows what this is, and I'm one of the first people in Britain to play these things, and I was in video at the time. I just thought, I want to be at the beginning of something. Yeah. And because if you read books about this sort of stuff, that's when the coolest stuff happens at the very beginning. And it lays down, I guess the rest of history of that thing. So hopefully when the book's written about all this stuff, we're in it somewhere.
Yeah, hopefully, right?
Yeah, there'll be a little footnote.
Just something like that. That'd
something.
Be nice.
Yeah, at least there'll be a footnote. I'll be like that. Thank you so much, Owen. That was lovely.
Really good.
Yeah. No, I love doing this. Thank you for going on this adventure with us.
Very happy to. Anytime.
Yeah. I'll have you back one day.
Yeah.
When you've invented the Westworld portal, and ruined everyone's life.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we'll go from there. If you'd like to follow us on social media, cogs.show on Instagram and TikTok. We're also on YouTube, the Cogs Lab, where you can see this podcast. I'm sure you've already subscribed. If you haven't, do. But you'll also see lots of cool stuff of our life in Cogs. Until next time, keep dreaming big, and we'll see you on our next Inventure.